I pedalled my battered red bicycle down the cracked sidewalk of Moonrise Bay, the salty tang of the Pacific mingling with the faint sweetness of honeysuckle climbing the fence at Mrs. Pennington's yard. At 16, I'd memorised every inch of this route, the way the boardwalk creaked in the morning light, the weathered clapboard of her house at the corner of Harbour Street, and the unruly garden that my father, Marcus Trent, had faithfully maintained every single Saturday since his divorce from Valeria Pennington. That morning, the gate was already ajar. I swung off my bike, letting the handlebars brush against the fence, and approached Dad as he wiped sweat from his brow. He was bent over the mower, pollen dusting his work shirt, blades humming steadily. He glanced up, offering a tired but genuine smile. "Morning, Izzy," he said, using the nickname I'd had since childhood. "Got coffee?" I reached into my backpack and pulled out a chipped mug filled with steaming black coffee. "Thought you'd need it," I replied, handing it to him. He accepted it gratefully, taking a slow, appreciative sip. In that moment, the sunrise painted the shingles in rose gold hues, and for a heartbeat, I remembered summers spent here, chasing fireflies through tall grass, sipping lemonade on the porch swing, listening to Mum's sister Valeria tell stories of Louisiana bayous. Those memories felt surreal now, as if they belonged to someone else's life. Dad cleared his throat and restarted the mower. I lingered by the gate, watching him carve neat lines across the overgrown lawn. My chest tightened at the sight of tangled jasmine and hydrangeas, each wild tendril a testament to the neglect that had crept into a relationship once so full of promise. Since his divorce from Valeria, Dad had refused any payment. He told her it was family, because he promised to look after her father, Gregory Pennington, after that terrifying day when Gregory wandered into traffic, confused and frightened by his own memories. Dad had patched up his broken walker, guided him home, and stayed by his side through every sleepless night. I was still lost in those thoughts when Valeria's voice sliced through the morning air like broken glass. Well, if it isn't the dutiful gardener and his little shadow. She stood framed in the doorway, arms folded over a crisp linen blouse, ash blonde hair pulled into a tight chignon, white jeans so immaculate they looked painted on. My heart clenched. I'd hoped today would pass without incident, just another Saturday of quiet work. I swallowed and lifted my chin. "Good morning, Aunt Valeria," I said, keeping my voice steady. Her gaze flicked between Dad and me, cold and appraising. "I hope you're not planning on staying long," she said, lips curling into that practiced smirk. "We have guests this afternoon, and this place needs refinement." She glanced at Dad's coffee mug on the railing. "Is that mine?" Dad swallowed. "Yes, I brought it out for my routine." Valeria laughed softly. "Funny, I thought your routine ended with the divorce." Her stilettos clicked as she stepped onto the porch. "You've become nothing but a shadow in my life, Marcus. An unwelcome reminder that some promises are better broken." My grip tightened on the bicycle's handle. I'd learnt from Dad that courage wasn't loud or angry, it was deliberate. "I'm here because I choose to be," I said quietly. "And Gregory is my grandfather." The word grandfather struck her like a blow. She turned on her heel and slipped back inside, the door clicking shut behind her. The sudden hush pressed around us, broken only by the mower's droning. I swung back onto my bike, though my voice trembled with tension. "You okay?" Dad called, pausing his work. I nodded and wheeled my bike beside him. "Let's finish before the tide comes in," I whispered. Together, we worked in sync, Dad guiding the mower in straight lines, me trimming stray branches. Every clipped leaf and sweep of the blades reaffirmed our quiet bond, unspoken, resilient, unwavering. And in that soft morning light, I realised kindness isn't recognised for its beauty, but for the fact that it persists even when cruelty tries to drown it out. The next morning, I woke to a faint rustle beneath the front door, a crisp white envelope embossed with the Moonrise Bay Homeowners Association seal. My heart tightened as I slipped from my bed and padded down the hallway in bare feet, Dad was already at the kitchen table, reading the notice over a steaming mug of coffee. I stood in the doorway, watching him unfold the letter with deliberate calm. "We've received a formal complaint," he said quietly, his voice steady. "Accusation of harassment against a senior resident." He tapped the bolded header, dated the previous day. "Filed by Mrs. Pennington herself." I felt a hot surge of indignation, but forced myself to remain silent. Dad folded the letter with care and placed it in the top drawer of the table. "They'll think our kindness is an intrusion," he murmured, more to himself than to me. "Silence can be mistaken for consent." That evening, while I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I heard him moving in the storage room. I slipped out of my room and tiptoed down the hall. Through the cracked door, I saw Dad hovering over his old laptop, a portable hard drive humming at his side, and a small USB stick labelled backup resting beside it. He didn't notice me at first. The soft glow of the screen revealed a list of files: front porch cam Jan, backyard cam Feb, each date spanning nearly 9 months. I sank onto a folding chair behind him and watched as he clicked through the folders. "Every camera I installed is still live," he said, eyes fixed on the screen. 2 at the front, 1 in the backyard, wired into Mrs. Pennington's router. Footage automatically backed up to my cloud server. My pulse raced. I remembered the afternoon I helped him tuck cables behind the flower bed, how he'd shown me the tiny SD card slots and the remote access settings. We both thought it was for safety. No hint then that it might become our only defence. He stopped on a file labelled July 0815 14.mp4. On the screen, I saw Mrs. Pennington holding a half-full glass of rosé, leaning over the fence alongside her daughter, Elise. They laughed, shoulders brushing, and Mrs. Pennington said in a clear voice, "She thinks doing favours gives her leverage. Just wait until I put her in her place." I felt a chill as her words registered. "She meant me," I whispered. Dad nodded slowly. "No edits," he said, metadata intact. "Original timestamps. I kept the chain of custody sealed." He paused the clip and leaned back. "Tomorrow is the HOA meeting. 2nd Thursday of every month. We'll go alone." "You don't need to say a single word." I nodded, though my stomach knotted with nerves. All those Saturdays, watching Dad mow Mrs. Pennington's lawn, trimming the hedges, fixing Gregory's walker, I'd believed that matters of the heart were enough. Now I understood that sometimes proof is the only language cruelty respects. That night, I barely slept. I lay awake imagining the sterile community centre room, folding chairs in neat rows, water bottles lined on a table, nameplates tilted slightly as if to judge whoever sat before them. I pictured her entering in pearls and pressed linens, exuding the righteousness she clung to like armour. When Thursday morning arrived, I felt the restless ache of anticipation. Dad and I ate a quiet breakfast, scrambled eggs and toast, and he gave me a gentle nod. "Ready?" he asked. I swallowed and braced myself. "Ready?" At precisely 9:30, we stood in the empty hallway outside the HOA meeting room. The door was propped open, the fluorescent lights humming inside. Dad slipped the USB stick into his pocket. I gripped my small shoulder bag, heart pounding. As we entered, all eyes turned to us. Familiar faces of neighbours I'd waved to on morning walks, members of the garden club in summer dresses, the HOA chair with his gold-rimmed glasses perched on his nose. Mrs. Pennington sat near the front, clutching a brown folder. She looked calm, too calm. The chair glanced at us. "Mr. Trent, the board will now hear the complaint you've been served." His tone was polite but firm. Dad stepped forward. "Before you proceed, I have context to present." He reached into his pocket and placed the USB stick on the table with a soft thunk. Murmurs rippled through the room. I watched Mrs. Pennington's composure falter as Dad connected the stick to the laptop. A single click filled the room with the first clip, her flinging a glass bottle over the fence into the neighbour's rosebed last March. Petals lay crushed beneath shards of glass. Heads shook. Someone whispered, "Outrageous." Without pause, Dad advanced to the next file. The July 08/15/14.mp4 clip. There she was again, laughing, taunting me, oblivious to the weight of her words. Silence fell like a blanket. One board member cleared his throat. "Are these recordings authentic?" he asked. Dad looked up, calm as the dawn. "Original metadata intact, unedited, stored on an off-site backup. I can provide the authentication chain." Gasps fluttered around the room. Mrs. Pennington's hands trembled on her folder. She opened her mouth, but no sound came. I stood at Dad's side, watching the truth unfold in silent digital frames. In that moment, I realised that our quiet acts of care had led to this reckoning, and justice required nothing more than the courage to let the evidence speak. When the chair finally spoke, his voice sounded distant to me. "The complaint is hereby withdrawn, effective immediately." Relief flooded me. Dad simply nodded and retrieved the USB stick. As we left the room, I glanced back at Mrs. Pennington, her face ashen, her reputation unravelling in the hush that followed our silence. Outside, the sun shone as if nothing had happened, but to me, everything had changed. I had witnessed the power of truth laid bare, and I knew that kindness, backed by conviction, could echo louder than any accusation. The morning after the HOA meeting, I woke with a curious sense of lightness, as though I'd shed a heavy cloak in the night. The Pacific breeze drifted through my open window, carrying the cries of gulls and the tang of sea salt. I lay still for a moment, listening to the lull of waves beyond the dunes, and then swung my legs over the side of the bed. Downstairs, I found Dad in the kitchen, humming softly as he prepared oatmeal and berries. Sunlight spilled across the table, illuminating the scuffed surface where the HOA letter and the USB stick still lay, untouched since yesterday's upheaval. Dad glanced up when I entered, his tired eyes shining with calm pride. "How are you feeling?" he asked, spoon poised above the bowl. I sank into my chair and let out a relieved sigh. Like something inside me has finally shifted. I sleep better knowing the truth is out there. He nodded, scooping a portion onto my plate. "You did well, Isabel. You stood by me when it mattered." A small smile tugged at my lips. It felt strange to accept praise for simply speaking the truth, but Dad's words settled around me like sunshine warming damp earth. After breakfast, we drove the familiar route to Mrs. Pennington's house, only this time the yard looked different. The grass had been mowed in crisp lines by a landscaping crew wearing matching green uniforms. The hydrangeas were pruned into neat spheres, the jasmine trimmed back so the fence was visible again. A glossy "for sale" sign stood crooked in one corner, the agent's number printed in bold white letters. I parked the car where I always did and stepped onto the porch. The door opened before I could knock. Mrs. Pennington stood there in a simple cotton dress, no pearls, no smirk, her ash blonde hair loose around her shoulders. Her eyes were red-rimmed, and she held a small box of leftover holiday cookies. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, voice trembling. "For everything." I studied her for a moment, unsure what to say. The hush of the morning and the gentle crash of waves behind her made the moment feel fragile, like stepping onto a cracked ice floe. Dad placed a firm hand on my shoulder. I drew in a breath. "Thank you for your apology," I replied, keeping my tone even. "I hope you find peace in your new home." She nodded and offered me the box of cookies. "I'd like you two to have them," she said, voice small. As a small gesture of goodwill, I accepted the box and returned it to her hands. "We'll donate them to the community centre," I said. "Mr. Delaney's food pantry could use them." Her lips quivered into a tentative smile. "You're always so kind." Kindness. The word settled in my chest, steady and unwavering. I nodded and turned to leave, Dad beside me. As we walked down the steps, I glanced back at her, vulnerable, human, stripped of her facade. The "for sale" sign swayed gently in the ocean breeze. As we drove away, I felt a bittersweet pang. Our chapter with Mrs. Pennington had closed, but a new one awaited beyond the dunes. That afternoon, I accompanied Dad to Gregory's little cottage across town. Gregory sat in his favourite rocking chair by the window, a knitted blanket draped across his knees. He looked up with a smile when we entered, though his eyes held a flicker of confusion. "Hello, dearest," he greeted, patting the vacant spot on the chair. I heard the commotion at the meeting. Dad and I exchanged a glance. I sat beside him, smoothing his blanket. "Are you okay, Grandfather?" I asked softly. He nodded slowly. "I'm fine, my dear. A bit tired, but fine." I reached for his hand as Dad poured him a cup of tea. Gregory sipped it thoughtfully and said, "You know, your father is a remarkable man. Always was." I squeezed his hand. "That's because he leads by example." Gregory's lips curved into a gentle smile. "I've watched you both, caring for me, caring for others. It means more than you know." Tears prickled at my eyes. "We do it because we want to." He patted my hand. "And because love demands action." We spent the afternoon reading old family photo albums, sun-faded Polaroids of me as a toddler, Dad teaching me to fish at the pier, Mum smiling in a picnic snapshot I barely remembered. Each image whispered a story of hope and belonging that felt somehow renewed after the ordeal with Mrs. Pennington. Later, as we left Gregory's cottage, I paused at his gate. He waved as I climbed into the car, his blanket fluttering on the rocking chair. The sky above was a wash of coral and lavender as the sun sank toward the horizon. On the drive home, Dad and I spoke little. Instead, we listened to the radio's soft jazz and watched Moonrise Bay unfold before us. Harbour lights blinking on in the distance, the dunes swaying with golden grasses, the boardwalk glowing under emerging street lamps. I realised then that our acts of service, those Saturdays spent mowing lawns and fixing walkers, had always been more than chores. They had been a testament to our belief in family, in community, in the power of quiet integrity. And now, as dusk settled around us, I felt the promise of tomorrow stretching out like the shoreline, ever-changing but unbreakably connected to the unspoken truths we dared to uphold. Tomorrow, I would return to school, and life would resume its familiar rhythm: algebra tests, art club meetings, evenings spent under string lights in our backyard. But something fundamental had shifted within me. I knew that no matter where I went or what challenges awaited, the lesson of Moonrise Bay would guide me. That kindness, backed by truth, holds the power to transform even the most hardened hearts. The following Monday felt surreal. I pedalled my bicycle down Elmwood Avenue toward Clearwater High School, the autumn air crisp with the promise of change. Summer's last roses still clung to the hedges, but their petals had begun to fade, much like the tensions of the past weeks. My backpack sat lightly on my shoulders, carrying only the essentials: textbooks, sketchbook, and a neatly folded letter of recommendation from Principal Hartwell. I hadn't dared open it yet, preferring the quiet weight of possibility tucked inside my folder. As I crossed the parking lot, clusters of students laughed around open lockers. Familiar faces turned toward me. Emma Chen with her bright headband, Raphael Soto carrying a guitar case, and the Henderson twins, whose chatter never seemed to pause. I offered nods and half smiles. It felt strange to greet them after the dramatic events with Mrs. Pennington. Rumours had swirled through the faculty lounge and down the corridors, about the HOA meeting, the shocking video evidence, and the swift withdrawal of the complaint. I wasn't sure how much they'd heard or what they thought. I slipped into homeroom, room 105, Mrs. Gallagher's domain, where desks were arranged in neat rows. My usual seat by the window was open, sun illuminating its surface. I placed my backpack at the foot of the desk and sat, smoothing my skirt. Mrs. Gallagher glanced up from her attendance sheet and offered a warm smile. "Isabel Trent, welcome back. We missed you last week." I returned her smile with genuine warmth. "Thank you, Miss Gallagher. I'm glad to be here." A murmur ran through the room as classmates noticed the official-looking envelope peeking from my folder. Emma leaned over and whispered, "What's that?" I shook my head subtly. Nothing important, but Emma's eyes shone with curiosity. I had a fleeting impulse to share everything, every camera angle, every shard of evidence. But I remembered Dad's words. Sometimes the loudest statements are made in silence. The bell rang, and the day unfolded in familiar rhythm. Algebra notes, a group project in environmental science, and lunch in the courtyard. As I carried my tray past the food line, turkey wrap, carrot sticks, a plain roll, I felt a tap on my shoulder. Raffle grinned. "Heard you went to war with Mrs. Pennington." My cheeks warmed. "Not exactly," I replied, setting my tray down. "Just helped my dad handle a problem." He nodded, taking a seat beside me. "Word is, you and your dad showed them the truth and shut it down." I shrugged, opening my roll. "We just had the facts. That's all." Raphael leaned back, eyes thoughtful. "Facts can be mighty powerful." He glanced around, then quietly. "People say you two are heroes now." I swallowed my bite, feeling the weight of the label. "I don't know about heroes," I whispered. "We just did what was right." Emma joined us, balancing her salad and giggling softly. "Whatever you call it, I'm proud of you." She winked, and I felt a surge of gratitude for my friend's support. After lunch, the final bell rang for art class, my sanctuary. Mr. Jacobs stood by the easel, setting out tubes of paint and a stack of blank canvases. "Today, I want you to capture an emotion in colour," he announced. "Think of a moment that transformed you." My mind immediately travelled back to that August morning, the quiet tension in Mrs. Pennington's hallway, the hush that followed the video revelation, and the newfound freedom in Dad's stoic solidarity. With a deep breath, I selected my canvas and began mixing paints, a soft wash of seafoam green for hope, streaks of bronze for stubborn resolve, and a swirl of lavender for healing. Each brushstroke felt like an affirmation, that kindness and truth could coexist in vibrant harmony. Halfway through the class, the door creaked, and Principal Hartwell slipped in, carrying a folder. He paused at the back, watching students work. My heart thumped as he approached my easel. I didn't look up. Instead, I added a dash of sunrise gold to the centre of the canvas. "Isabel," he said quietly. I turned and offered a tentative smile. "May I?" He gestured toward an empty stool. I nodded, stepping aside as he sat. He opened the folder and withdrew a letter, its broad white header emblazoned with the school seal. "I wanted you to have this." My breath caught as I took the letter. I recognised the elegant handwriting. Principal Hartwell's personal commendation. He cleared his throat. "Your actions, and those of your father, demonstrated integrity, compassion, and courage. The school board has approved 4 scholarships in your name to support community service initiatives." I stared at the letter, words blurring as gratitude and disbelief flooded me. I don't know what to say." He smiled kindly. "Say you'll keep showing others that doing the right thing matters. That's enough." As he left, my classmates glanced over and offered shy applause. My cheeks warmed again, but this time with pride rather than embarrassment. I closed the letter and tucked it into my backpack, feeling the promise it carried. When art class ended, I lingered by my painting. The colours blended into a portrait of conviction, a visual testament to the summer's lessons. Outside, the sky gleamed in late afternoon light, and I realised that high school, with its cliques and chatter, had shifted too. Rumour gave way to respect. And as I gathered my brushes and carefully wrapped my canvas, I knew that my story in Moonrise Bay was far from over. There were more sidewalks to bike, more gardens to tend, and more chances to let kindness and truth shape the world around me. The afternoon sun slanted between the pines as I rode my bicycle toward Harbour Cove Park, the place where Dad and I had first tested the idea of community service months ago. The path wound past driftwood sculptures and wildflower patches, and I felt a familiar flutter of anticipation. Today, I was meeting the local garden club, to which I'd been invited as an honorary member, to help plan their fall planting. As I approached the wooden pavilion, I spotted familiar faces gathered around folding tables. Mrs. Alvarez, the retired librarian, Mr. Chang, the amateur botanist, and several others whose green thumb reputations were as legendary as their storied rose collections. I parked my bike by the entry arch and smoothed my skirt before stepping forward. "Isabel," Mrs. Alvarez called, waving me over. She wore a wide-brimmed straw hat adorned with hand-painted sunflowers. "We're so glad you could join us today." I settled onto an empty chair and unfolded my notebook. "Thank you for inviting me," I said. "I'd love to help in any way I can." Mr. Chang leaned in, adjusting his round glasses. "Your work with the HOA incident impressed us all," he said earnestly. "Integrity under fire is rare. We're hoping you'll help organise our spring fundraiser and design a demonstration garden for drought-resistant plants." I paused, surprised by their confidence. "I'd be honoured," I replied, flipping open my notebook to a blank page. The meeting began with introductions and a review of last year's projects: wildflower meadows, pollinator pathways, and a vegetable patch supplying the food pantry. When it was my turn to speak, I outlined an idea: using repurposed driftwood logs as raised beds, combining native succulents with hardy herbs. I sketched a rough layout, labelling each section with plant names and maintenance notes. As I spoke, I felt my nerves settle into steady determination. By the time I finished, the table was covered with sticky note feedback and approving nods. Mrs. Alvarez clapped her hands. "Brilliant, Isabel. This will be a showpiece for Moonrise Bay." Afterwards, I gathered supplies: graph paper, seed catalogues, and a couple of small succulents gifted by Mrs. Alvarez. As I loaded them into my bag, Mr. Chang approached. "You know," he said quietly, "your kindness has a ripple effect. Today, we're all inspired to do more." I smiled, thinking of Dad's words about service and proof. "I'm just paying it forward," I said. With the garden club's plans taking shape in my mind, I hopped back on my bike and pedalled toward home, the evening breeze cool on my cheeks. Somewhere ahead, new blossoms would take root, testaments to community, compassion, and the quiet power of doing what's right. And I knew that, like those seeds, my own journey of service had only just begun. The next morning, dew still clung to the petals of the morning glories as I stepped onto the porch. Dad was already up, repairing Gregory's walker on the kitchen table. The rhythmic click of his tools and the soft light through the lace curtains made the room feel safe, ordinary, exactly what I needed before heading out. "I packed your lunch," he said without looking up, sliding a brown paper bag across the table. "Turkey sandwich, apple, and those granola bars you like." "Thanks, Dad," I replied, grabbing the bag. I paused, studying his calm expression. "Ready for another day?" He looked up and nodded. Born ready, I waved goodbye and cycled toward Clearwater Community Centre, where I'd volunteered to help with after-school tutoring. My shift ran from 3 to 5, but I arrived early, eager to organise the small stack of donated books we'd gathered. In the vestibule, I found Mrs. Patel, the programme coordinator, arranging piles of math workbooks and novels on folding tables. "Isabel, so good to see you," she greeted, brushing a strand of silver hair behind her ear. "I've assigned you to help Sarah and Ahmed this afternoon. They're struggling with reading comprehension." I smiled and rolled up my sleeves. "Let's get started." At 3 o'clock sharp, Sarah Grace and Ahmed trickled in. Sarah Grace, a first grader with curly pigtails and bright eyes, clutched a picture book nearly as big as her torso. Ahmed, in 4th grade, carried a spiral notebook thick with scratched-out math problems. Both offered shy waves as I invited them to the table. "Today," I began, "we'll read a story and then answer some questions together. Sound good?" Sarah Grace beamed. "Yes!" I opened the picture book, The Littlest Lighthouse Keeper, and we read aloud in turns. Every so often, I paused to ask, "What do you think happens next?" Or, "How does she feel?" Slowly, their confidence grew. Sarah Grace's voice rang clear, and Ahmed pointed out details I'd missed on previous reads. When we finished, I handed them question sheets, matching emotions to scenes, predicting endings, and drawing alternate covers. Ahmed furrowed his brow over one prompt, Why did the keeper leave the lighthouse unattended? He tapped his pencil. I'm not sure. I leaned forward. What clues are in the text? He glanced back at the pages and brightened. She went to help the ship's captain because he was in trouble. I nodded. Exactly. Good catch. I offered him a star sticker for each correct answer. By 5 o'clock, both had earned at least 3 each. Their proud smiles warmed me more than any compliment. After tidying the tables, I packed up the remaining books and waved goodbye as Sarah Grace bounded out the door. Ahmed lingered. Can you come back tomorrow? He asked, eyes hopeful. I ruffled his hair. I'll be here. Outside, the sky held the golden glow of late afternoon. I hopped onto my bike, the day's small victories humming inside me. Around the corner, I spotted Mr. Chang tending to the newly planted succulents in the demonstration garden. He waved, and I slowed to chat. They're thriving, Isabel, he said, brushing soil from his fingers. Your design was perfect. People were stopping by to ask questions. I beamed. Thank you. I'm glad they're doing well. He leaned closer. We're planning a workshop next week. Sustainable gardening for beginners. Would you lead a session on repurposing materials? I felt that familiar flutter of anticipation. I'd love to. Cycling home, I reflected on how each act of service, tutoring, gardening, caring for Gregory, wove together into a tapestry of community. My world had expanded beyond the confines of Mrs. Pennington's yard. I carried a sketchbook with me now, jotting design ideas and lesson plans, all underlined by one guiding principle: integrity in every action. When I arrived home, Dad was in the garage, sorting cables and power tools. Gregory's walker leaned against the wall, newly oiled and silent. How was tutoring? He asked, wiping grease from his palms. Great, I said, dumping my backpack on the workbench. Sarah Grace and Ahmed both did amazingly. They want me back tomorrow. He smiled. Sounds like you're making a real difference. I paused, studying his face. I couldn't do it without you. He set aside the tools and ruffled my hair. You've got a gift, Izzy. You know how to listen and how to help. I hugged him. Thanks, Dad. Later that evening, as I lay in bed, I thought of the winding path that had led me here. From mowing a spitefully neglected lawn, to standing up for justice, to planting seeds, literal and figurative, in the lives around me. Each step had demanded courage, patience, and kindness. With a contented sigh, I drifted to sleep, ready to greet tomorrow's sun and the chance to serve again. The following Wednesday morning found me standing in the centre of Harbour Cove's demonstration garden, heart fluttering with equal parts excitement and nerves. The sun was still low on the horizon, gilding the weathered driftwood planters with soft gold. Rows of succulents, rosemary, and lavender glistened with dew, and a crowd of 15 community members gathered on folding chairs beneath the pavilion's canvas roof. I clutched my notes, hand-lettered index cards detailing each step of the workshop, and took a steadying breath. Good morning, everyone, I began, letting my voice carry across the hushed attendees. Thank you for joining me today for Sustainable Gardening with Repurposed Materials. My name is Isabel Trent. I paused to smile at Mr. Chang, whose encouraging nod from the back row bolstered my confidence. In the next 90 minutes, we'll explore how to transform simple, oft-discarded items into beautiful, low-maintenance planters perfect for our coastal climate. I lifted a small weathered gallon jug, once destined for recycling, and held it aloft. Take something like this plastic jug. With a few basic tools, the cap, a utility knife, and some paint, you can turn it into a hanging planter that drains properly and looks charming. I demonstrated drilling drainage holes in the bottom, then brought out non-toxic pastel paints for a quick, cheerful makeover. Volunteers stepped forward, pencils in hand, sketching their own designs in my workbook template. As I moved through the demonstration, I encouraged questions. A retired fisherman raised his hand. What about sun exposure? Won't the plastic degrade in our salt air? I nodded. Good point. That's why I seal these with a coat of outdoor-grade varnish, and I recommend placing them under partial shade for longevity. You'll get months of use before even considering recycling or reusing again. Next, I showed them how to fashion a planter from an old wooden wine crate. With a handful of nails, some landscape fabric, and potting soil, we lined it to prevent soil loss and planted hardy sedum and thyme. As we worked, side by side, community members and me, conversation blossomed. Mrs. Alvarez shared tips on propagating rosemary cuttings. A teenager named Maya enthused about starting her own small container garden at home. Midway through the session, Dad arrived, carrying 3 stacks of iced lemonade in glass bottles. "For our hard workers," he announced with a grin, passing out the refreshments. The crowd applauded, and I felt a rush of gratitude as I accepted a bottle. The crisp tang of lemon and mint washed over me, and I realised how much this moment mirrored our journey. Sweet, a little tart, but ultimately refreshing. We wrapped up the hands-on portion by grouping planters around a salvaged metal cart, creating a mobile herb garden that could be wheeled to any sunny spot. I invited everyone to take a small succulent to nurture at home, encouraging them to document growth with photos and share progress at our next meeting. After the workshop, as people filed out, Mr. Chang approached me once more. "That was fantastic, Izzy. I think this will become a seasonal event." He handed me a flyer for the next community fair. "We'd love you to host a demonstration there as well." My cheeks warmed, but I managed a steady nod. "I'd be honoured." He smiled and patted my shoulder before heading off to tidy the tables. I gathered my notes and leaned against the pavilion post, breathing deeply. The gentle hum of conversation drifted around me, neighbours chatting about compost bins, the merits of drought-tolerant succulents, and plans to expand the garden to include a butterfly habitat. Later that afternoon, I pedalled home under a sky streaked with pink and orange clouds. My mind replayed the workshop, the way shoulders straightened when someone mastered a new skill, the ripple of applause when the wine crate planter stood complete, and Dad's proud smile as he offered lemonade. Each smile, each spark of enthusiasm, reminded me why service mattered. At dinner, Gregory joined us at the table for the first time in weeks. He'd grown more lucid lately, fewer moments of confusion and more glimpses of the man I remembered from childhood. "You've been busy, my dear," he said, his eyes crinkling as he examined my hands, speckled with potting soil and paint. I laughed and held his hand. "It's been a good day. I taught 15 people how to make planters from old jugs and crates." He winked. "That sounds like a masterpiece to me." Dad cleared his throat. "There's more. The local newspaper caught wind of your HOA story in the garden workshop. They want to run a feature on you for Saturday's edition." I nearly choked on my soup. "A newspaper feature?" Dad nodded. "They said they admire how a teenager stood up for her community and then turned that energy into positive change." Gregory beamed. "You've made us all proud." That night, after I scrubbed paint from my nails and changed into pyjamas, Dad and I sat in the living room under the soft glow of a lamp. I spread out the newspaper mock-up he'd printed, a rough layout with my photograph by the community garden, and a headline reading, "From Silent Witness to Green Innovator, Teen Sparks Change in Moonrise Bay." I traced the words with my finger. "I never imagined any of this." Dad folded the mock-up carefully. "You imagined it for all of us. You reminded us that standing up for what's right can blossom into something beautiful." I leaned my head against his shoulder. Outside, the moon drifted above the dunes, casting silver light on the lawn Marcus had mowed so many Saturdays, on the flowers I'd helped plant, and on the promise of all the good yet to come. In that quiet moment, I realised that my journey, once defined by reacting to injustice, had become one of proactive compassion. And as long as I had a voice, a garden, and a community behind me, I knew I'd keep nurturing both the earth and the hearts of those around me. A soft knock at my bedroom door woke me just after sunrise. I sat up, blinking against the pale morning light, and saw Dad standing in the doorway with an envelope in hand. His expression was unreadable but gentle. They printed it, he said, handing me the folded newspaper. My heart fluttered as I smoothed the pages and read the headline again. From Silent Witness to Green Innovator, Teen Sparks Change in Moonrise Bay. Beneath it, my photo from the demonstration garden glowed with the morning sun, and the article detailed our HOA confrontation, the community workshop, and plans for a town-wide sustainability fair. I closed my eyes for a moment, absorbing the weight of recognition. "It's real," I whispered. Dad smiled and sat on the edge of my bed. "It's real. They're running my quote too, about how proof and kindness can reshape a community." I unfolded the paper further, scanning the paragraphs. My cheeks warmed as I read neighbours' testimonials, praise from Mr. Chang and Mrs. Alvarez, gratitude from families benefiting from the tutoring programme, admiration from Principal Hartwell. One line caught my breath. "Isabel Trent proves that even the quietest voice can echo across an entire town." Later that morning, as I bicycled to school, the weight of the newspaper tucked safely in my backpack felt both thrilling and heavy. Students passed me in the hall, offering nods and smiles. Even the Henderson twins paused their banter to give me a thumbs up. I realised how far I'd come, from feeling like a shadow in Mrs. Pennington's yard to feeling seen by hundreds more. Homeroom was buzzing. Emma waved me over to her desk, where she held a copy of the paper. "Look," she said, pointing at my picture. "You're practically a local celebrity." I laughed softly, sliding into my seat. "Celebrity is a stretch," I said, though my heart fluttered at the attention. Before the bell rang, Mrs. Gallagher tapped the board. "Class, please welcome our special guest, Councilwoman Ramirez." My breath caught as a poised woman in a navy suit strode to the front, greeted by polite applause. "I'm here to recognise Isabel Trent for her outstanding community service," Councilwoman Ramirez announced, holding a framed certificate. "In the spirit of Moonrise Bay's volunteer tradition, I present this to Isabel on behalf of the City Council." She handed me the certificate, embossed in gold, declaring me an official community ambassador. My classmates clapped warmly, and some whistled. I rose, shook the councilwoman's hand, and accepted the honour. My palms felt clammy, but I forced a steady smile. After school, I rode to Harbour Cove Park, where a small crowd gathered for the ribbon cutting of the fall planting season. The mayor was there, cameras flashed, and I felt the surreal mix of pride and nerves again. I stood beside Dad and Councilwoman Ramirez as she spoke. "Thanks to Isabel's vision and leadership, this garden will flourish year after year, teaching sustainable practices and fostering community spirit." Then she handed me a small pair of golden scissors. With a collective 1, 2, 3, we snipped the ribbon and applause erupted. I held back tears, overwhelmed by how something that began as a quiet act of kindness had grown into a town-wide movement. In the days that followed, life settled into a new rhythm of service, school, and occasional interviews. My mornings often began with planting seedlings or tutoring sessions. Afternoons were filled with art class, where I painted canvases inspired by nature. Evenings saw me studying beneath the porch light or helping Dad with Gregory's care. One afternoon, however, a surprise email arrived. It was from Mrs. Hathaway, the organiser of the upcoming Moonrise Bay Sustainability Fair. She invited me to speak on the main stage and warned that our friend Valeria Pennington might be in the audience, rumoured to have purchased a house nearby. My chest tightened at the thought. At dinner that night, I hesitated before sharing the news. Dad looked up mid-bite. "Everything all right?" I placed the email on the table. "They want me to speak at the fair, but Valeria might be there." Dad studied the message. "This is your moment to show forgiveness as well as resolve. You don't have to single her out or name her. Share your story, focus on the future." I nodded, absorbing his calm strength. "You're right." Over the next week, I drafted my speech. An opening about growing up in Moonrise Bay, the links between kindness and truth, the power of community to heal and reinvent itself. I practiced in front of the mirror, then in front of Dad, who offered gentle tweaks. Fair day dawned crisp and clear. The park was alive with booths showcasing solar panels, compost demonstrations, and reusable crafts. I stepped onto the main stage, heart thundering as I gazed at the assembled crowd. Families, neighbours, local officials. And at the front row, I spotted a familiar figure in white jeans and a linen blouse. My chest stung, but I squared my shoulders and began. "Hello, Moonrise Bay," I said, voice clear. When I first stood here months ago, I felt unseen. I was mowing a neighbour's yard, caring for my grandfather, and all I asked for was respect. I paused, letting the memory settle. What I discovered is that respect is earned not by demands, but by consistent, humble service. I spoke about the HOA meeting, about showing evidence instead of anger, about how our community's response, withdrawn complaint, garden rebirth, tutoring, expansion, proved that unity grows from shared truth. I concluded, we all have something to give, our time, our talents, our voices. Let us use them not to divide, but to build, not to punish, but to uplift. The soil we tend today is the legacy we leave for tomorrow. As I stepped back, the crowd erupted in applause. I spotted Valeria's eyes glistening, perhaps with pride or regret or something indescribable. I offered her a small, sincere nod before turning to hug Dad. Walking off the stage, I felt a surge of peace. The moment had belonged to everyone, to Gregory, to Dad, to the neighbours who believed in me, and yes, even to Valeria Pennington, whose actions had unwittingly sparked a movement of compassion. That evening, as the fair lights twinkled and lanterns glowed, I realised that my journey had brought me from silent witness to active ambassador. And in the gentle hush of the park, punctuated by laughter and music, I knew that kindness, backed by truth, would continue to guide Moonrise Bay toward a brighter tomorrow. The morning after the sustainability fair, I awoke to an unfamiliar stillness. The usual hum of neighbourhood traffic was softened by a thin veil of fog rolling in from the bay. I stretched under my quilt, feeling a gentle ache in my shoulders, evidence of yesterday's long day on stage and in the garden. Raising myself onto my elbow, I glanced at the stack of emails on my nightstand, including one from the regional library inviting me to host a youth eco-book club. Another from the mayor's office requested my input on a new community service grant. My heart fluttered with excitement and nerves. Turning over, I saw Dad's shoes by the door and realised he was already gone, likely delivering breakfast sandwiches to Gregory before today's therapy session. I swung my legs out of bed, pulled on a cosy sweater, and headed downstairs. In the kitchen, I found a note from Dad. Brunch with me at the Pier Cafe. Love, D. I smiled, filling the kettle for tea and unpacking the leftover muffins from the fair. After a quick shower and a braid in my hair, I hopped on my bike and pedalled to the pier. The cafe sat perched on pilings above the water, its windows fogged with warmth inside. Dad waved as I approached, 2 steaming mugs in hand. He slid one across the table. Earl Grey? Perfect, I said, wrapping my hands around the cup. Outside, gulls wheeled and cried above the mist-enshrouded boats. We sipped quietly, the hush between us comfortable. I saw you on the local news tonight, Dad said after a moment, voice low. They ran footage of your speech and garden workshop. Moonrise Bay seems proud, I chuckled, swelling steam. I keep wondering if they'll see me as more than that, just a kid who had a lucky break. Dad shook his head. It wasn't luck. You worked for this. You stood up when many would have turned away. Warmth spread through me. Thanks. He studied the horizon. What's next for Isabel Trent, community ambassador? I thought of the library's email. I was invited to launch an eco-book club for middle schoolers, share stories about conservation and community service. Dad's eyes brightened. That sounds wonderful. I hesitated, twisting my braid. I worry I won't live up to it. What if the kids decide I'm boring? He reached across and squeezed my hand. You connect with people because you care. That's never boring. His words gave me courage. I nodded. Okay, I'll do it. Later that day, I biked to Clearwater Regional Library. the old brick building with ivy creeping across its facade. Inside, I met Miss Delgado, the children's librarian, who led me to a corner table piled with colourful picture books and novels. "Welcome, Isabel," she greeted, beaming. "We've reserved this space every Thursday after school." "I'd love for you to pick our first book." I ran my finger along the spines and selected a slim novel about a young girl who rebuilds a neglected community garden. "This one," I said. "It's about transformation, turning something forgotten into something thriving." Miss Delgado nodded. "Perfect. I'll promote it to the middle school students. You'll have a dozen by next week." I left the library with my heart soaring. The path before me branched into so many possibilities: garden programs, tutoring, public speaking engagements, youth mentorship. Yet, beneath all the accolades and excitement, my motivation remained simple: to care for others, to stand for truth, and to nurture beauty where it had been lost. That evening, I visited Gregory at the care home. He sat in the common room, surrounded by fellow residents and floral patterned armchairs. When he saw me, his face lit up. "Isabel," he croaked, patting the seat beside him. "Tell me your news." I sat and recounted the library invitation, paused, then added, "I spoke at the fair and Valeria was there." He frowned slightly. "How did that go?" "A lot of people clapped," I admitted. And I nodded toward her, but I didn't point fingers. Gregory's eyes softened. "Forgiveness is a gift you give yourself." I leaned in, pressing my head against his shoulder. "I think I understand that now." We sat together, watching an old nature documentary on the television mounted in the corner. Slow pans over coral reefs, schools of fish shimmering in sunlight, and a small boy planting seedlings on a beach. Gregory reached for my hand. "That boy reminds me of you," he murmured. I laughed softly. "I just hope I continue growing like him." He squeezed my hand. "You will." As I biked home under a sky now clearing of mist, I marvelled at how the threads of my life, garden soil, classroom desks, library shelves, had woven into a tapestry of purpose. I thought of Dad's unwavering support, the community's embrace, and Gregory's gentle wisdom. Each day seemed to bring new challenges and opportunities, but I felt ready. Tomorrow, I would stand before a circle of eager young readers and spark their imaginations. I would continue planting seeds of flowers, of ideas, of hope. And I knew that, in Moonrise Bay, kindness backed by truth would keep flourishing, just as the garden we had rescued from neglect. Saturday morning dawned cool and clear as I pedalled my bicycle toward Clearwater Bay Park. I carried a tote bag filled with copies of The Littlest Lighthouse Keeper, my Eco Book Club's inaugural selection, and a stack of bookmarks I'd designed featuring images of succulents and seashells. The park's open-air pavilion stood nestled among pines, its faded blue paint illuminated by soft light. By 10 o'clock, a circle of folding chairs awaited the middle schoolers, already arranged around a low table where I'd set out name tags, stickers, and colouring sheets. A gentle breeze stirred the sailboats anchored offshore, and the scent of salt mingled with the pine needles underfoot. I took a deep breath as the first students arrived. 7 curious faces, ranging from rising 6th graders to eager 8th graders. Among them was Maya, the teenager who'd helped plant succulents at the demonstration garden, and Jordan, whose parents owned the local cafe. Each child carried a copy of the book, their expressions a blend of anticipation and shyness. "Good morning," I began, smiling as they settled into their seats. "Welcome to our first Moonrise Bay Eco Book Club meeting. I'm Isabel Trent, and today we'll explore The Littlest Lighthouse Keeper, a story about resilience, community, and caring for the environment." I passed out name tags, delicate stamps of seashells and sage leaves, and invited each student to introduce themselves and share one thing they loved about Moonrise Bay. One by one, they spoke. Amelia loved the tide pools. Aidan collected driftwood for art. Harper enjoyed kayaking in the harbour. and Lucas cared for his grandmother's rose garden. When it was Maya's turn, she said softly, "I admire how people here help each other." I nodded, recognizing in her response the very spirit that had brought me to this moment. With introductions complete, I opened the book and read the first chapter aloud, my voice guiding them through the keeper's lonely nights and steadfast hope. The students followed along, some turning pages with deliberate care, others leaning forward to catch every word. After the reading, I invited them to discuss the lighthouse keeper's decision to venture into the roaring storm to guide a lost ship to safety. "How do you think she felt?" I asked. Harper's hand shot up. "Scared, but brave." "Exactly," I said, writing courage on a flip chart. "And what made her brave?" Jordan offered. "Because she cared about the sailors." I grinned. Compassion gives us courage. And that's something we'll practice today. I distributed colouring sheets depicting the lighthouse keeper and her lantern, along with facts about local marine wildlife. While you colour, I instructed, think about one small action you can take this week to help our environment. The pavilion echoed with the scratch of crayons and murmured conversation. I moved among them, offering encouragement and sharing ideas, creating a mini herb garden from recycled cans, organising a beach cleanup, or using reusable water bottles. When the timer chimed, set precisely to 30 minutes, I called them back together. Each student shared their plan. Amelia would label rocks to discourage people from disturbing tide pool habitats. Aidan would craft driftwood art to raise funds for the community garden. Lucas would help prune roses and compost the clippings. Harper would record a kayaking vlog about water conservation. And Maya would volunteer at the food pantry's urban garden. Their faces lit with excitement and purpose. I applauded each proposal. "These are wonderful," I said. "Remember, every small act creates ripples." I reached into my tote and handed out the bookmarks as reminders. "Take one home to inspire you." As the session ended, parents arrived to pick up their children. I greeted them warmly and shared brief updates on each student's plan. A few parents expressed gratitude. One mother hugged me, saying, "You've given my daughter confidence and a project she'll be proud of." My chest swelled with quiet joy. After everyone departed, I gathered chairs and packed up supplies. The pavilion felt emptier now, but the lingering energy of creativity and commitment remained. I wheeled my bike to the path's edge, pausing to look back at the charts scribbled with the students' ideas. On my ride home, I reflected on the morning's success. 24 hours earlier, I'd been honoured at the garden ribbon cutting, and today I'd mentored a new generation of stewards for Moonrise Bay. The continuity of service, from tutoring first graders to leading a community e-book club, reinforced the truth Dad always taught me. Caring hands and open hearts can transform any landscape, social or natural. That afternoon, I found Dad and Gregory on the porch, Gregory dozing in his chair while Dad read by the window. I approached quietly, holding 2 cups of iced tea. "Thought you might like something cool," I said, handing one to Dad and settling beside Gregory. He stirred and opened his eyes. "What have you been up to today?" I told him about the book club, the students, and their creative projects. His smile was gentle. "You're planting seeds in so many ways," he said. I nodded, sipping my tea. "And they'll keep growing on their own." Dad folded his newspaper. "You did good, Izzy." As the sun dipped toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the lawn, I realised that each chapter of my journey, HOA meeting, garden workshops, public speeches, tutoring, and book clubs, was part of a larger narrative, one of resilience, community, and the enduring power of compassionate action. And with every small step forward, Moonrise Bay became not just a place on the map, but a testament to what happens when kindness and truth shine like a lighthouse beacon through the storm. The following Tuesday, a gentle rain pattered against my bedroom window as I sipped chamomile tea, reviewing notes in my sketchbook. The calendar beside my desk was nearly filled, tutoring sessions every afternoon, garden club meetings on Thursdays, eco book club on Saturdays, and now the regional sustainability conference approaching in 2 weeks. I traced the neat grid of squares, each carefully labelled, and felt a tingle of both pride and exhaustion. This life of service and leadership was something I'd built step by deliberate step, yet I knew I needed to pace myself. By 8:30, I was pedalling through the mist toward Clearview High School, where I tutored after classes. The campus was quiet in the morning drizzle, droplets beading on the painted metal bike rack as I locked up my bicycle. I waved to Coach Ramirez, who was jogging laps wearing a bright yellow rain jacket. My bag slung over my shoulder carried math worksheets, grammar guides, and a thermos of hot cocoa, today's treat for the students to brighten the dreary afternoon. I signed in at the front office and headed to room 208, where Sarah Grace and Ahmed were waiting with expectant smiles. I set the cocoa on the table and greeted them each by name. Sarah Grace's curly pigtails were damp, and Ahmed's sneakers left muddy footprints. I handed each a small paper cup. "Hot chocolate break before we start?" I asked. Their eyes lit up. "Yes, please," they chorused, carefully sipping the sweet warmth. I smiled, remembering how one simple gesture could lift spirits. When cups were empty, I retrieved worksheets on fractions and reading comprehension. Today, we'd focus on word problems involving recipes, tying into my baking of molasses cookies years ago with Mum and Valeria. As we dove into solving each problem, I guided them gently, asking probing questions. If the recipe calls for 2.5 cups of flour and you want to make half the batch, how much flour would you use? Sarah Grace counted on her fingers before announcing 1.25 cups. Ahmed nodded in agreement. I praised their teamwork and gave them stickers shaped like colourful raindrops, symbolic reminders that even the smallest drop adds to the ocean. By 5 o'clock, the rain had eased to a steady drizzle. I packed up our materials and walked the kids to the bus stop, ensuring they had umbrellas and dry passage. As I pedalled home along Harbour Street, I passed Miss Delaney's food pantry, where a volunteer was unloading crates of fresh vegetables. I made a mental note to drop by with leftover cookies later in the week. At home, Dad was in the garage assembling new shelving for Gregory's keepsakes, old photographs, a battered compass from his days at sea, and the tattered, leather-bound journal he'd kept during childhood adventures. The scent of cedarwood filled the space. I leaned against the doorframe, pulling off my damp shoes. "How was tutoring?" Dad asked, passing me a wooden plank. His voice was warm and curious. "It was good," I replied, setting down my bag. "They both did great on the fraction problems, and they loved the cocoa," I grinned. Sarah Grace asked when we could do another hot chocolate day. Dad laughed, running a tape measure along the plank. "I'll mark that down." He handed me a bracket. "Ready to help?" Together, we installed the bracket and secured the shelf. Each plank slotted into place felt like another small anchor in Gregory's life, preserving memories for him. As we worked, I realised that service wasn't just about grand gestures. It was the accumulation of countless modest acts, done quietly and consistently. That evening, after dinner, I sat at the kitchen table writing an email to the sustainability conference organisers. They'd invited me to present on youth-led community initiatives and asked for a brief abstract. I typed, "Abstract in Moonrise Bay, a collective response to neighbourly conflict transformed into a series of youth-centred programmes, including eco-book clubs, sustainable gardening workshops, tutoring sessions, and community advisory roles." This presentation explores the role of personal initiative, intergenerational collaboration, and practical demonstration of kindness and evidence-based advocacy in fostering civic engagement among teens. I paused, letting the words settle. It felt surreal to describe my own story in third person. I hit send and leaned back, exhaling slowly. The rain had stopped, and a sliver of moon peeked through the clouds. As I packed away my laptop, my phone buzzed with a notification from the Garden Club's group chat. Reminder, full planting layout meeting this Sunday at 9 a.m. Please bring layout sketches and plant lists. I tapped a quick reply. On it. Then I closed my eyes for a moment, envisioning rows of native grasses and pollinator-friendly flowers. Later, I found Gregory in his favourite armchair, flipping through an old photo album. His wrinkled fingers caressed a sepia image of him as a young man aboard a fishing vessel, horizon endless behind him. I sat beside him and gently pointed to the photo. "Tell me about this day, grandfather." He smiled, voice soft with nostalgia. We were off the Oregon coast. The sea was angry, waves towering like mountains, but we held steady. That day taught me that when you face a storm, preparation and calm make all the difference. I nodded, absorbing the parallel to my own journey. Just like evidence helped us face our neighbour, and planning helps our garden survive drought, I said. He winked. "Exactly, my dear." "And you've weathered many storms with grace." I leaned my head on his shoulder, feeling the gentle rise and fall of his breath. Outside, the world was quiet after the rain, but inside, my heart brimmed with purpose. Tomorrow would bring another day of teaching, gardening, or speaking, but tonight I savoured the stillness and the knowledge that, like my grandfather at sea, I was ready to navigate whatever waves lay ahead, armed with kindness, truth, and unwavering resolve. A crisp chill settled over Moonrise Bay as I pedalled my bicycle toward the old seawall, where an empty concrete platform overlooked the restless waves. It was the perfect spot for our weekly Evening of Reflection event, a gathering Dad and I had organised for neighbours to share stories, ideas, and hopes under the twilight sky. Tonight, the theme was Lessons from the Tides. I arrived early and set up folding chairs in a semicircle, each draped with a cosy blanket I'd sewn from scraps donated by the quilting club. Lanterns flickered to life as dusk deepened, casting warm pools of light. Mum's old brass telescope, refurbished by Dad, stood ready for anyone who wished to peer at the first stars. I placed a tray of ginger lemon tea and spiced biscotti on a small table, then stepped back to survey our work. Guests began to drift in. Mr. Delaney from the food pantry, wrapped in a wool scarf, the Henderson twins chattering excitedly, Mayor Lopez and Councilwoman Ramirez exchanging polite greetings. Even Mrs. Pennington, wearing a simple navy jacket, approached with measured steps. I felt a flutter of nerves as she took a seat near the back, proof that even after everything, our community could share space in civility. I raised my voice gently. "Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining our Evenings of Reflection. Tonight, we draw inspiration from the sea, the way the tides rise and fall, the resilience of life along our shores, and the rhythms that shape our lives." I smiled, drawing a soft nod from Dad, who stood beside me. "I'll read a short excerpt from a poem I love." I retrieved a folded page from my pocket and began to read Emily Dickinson's lines about the ocean's endless conversation with the land. As I spoke, I watched faces soften in the lantern light, eyes turning toward the horizon where the last hints of sunset glowed. After I finished, Dad stepped forward. "I'd like to share a personal lesson," he said, voice steady. "When I first started mowing Mrs. Pennington's yard after the divorce, I felt like I was giving more than I received. But I learned that service isn't a transaction. It's a tide. Sometimes we give, sometimes we receive, and both are necessary for balance." He paused, and I felt the truth of his words echo in the hush. Next, I invited anyone who wished to speak to stand and share a reflection. One by one, neighbours rose. Mr. Delaney, whose food pantry now accepted homegrown herbs from our demonstration garden, spoke of how even a handful of fresh basil could brighten a family's meal and a stranger's day. And the Henderson twins recalled their first time planting pollinator flowers with me, and how watching bees flit among blossoms had taught them to appreciate small wonders. Mayor Lopez described how our community's unity had inspired his proposal for a new sustainability grant to fund youth-led service projects. Councilwoman Ramirez voiced her admiration for our town's capacity to turn conflict into cooperation. When it was Mrs. Pennington's turn, she rose slowly, her voice gentle. I've learned that compassion can erode even the hardest barriers, much like the sea shapes the shore, she said, glancing at Dad and then at me. Thank you for showing me that kindness backed by conviction can transform not just yards or gardens, but hearts. A soft murmur of agreement rippled through the gathering. My throat tightened. I stood and approached her, offering a simple nod of acknowledgement. Your words mean a lot, I said. We're all part of this tide together. She nodded, tears glinting in her eyes. I returned to my seat as Dad gently steered the discussion toward future events, beach cleanups, seed exchange fairs, and collaborative art projects. The gathering lingered long after the official close, neighbours chatting beneath the stars, sharing mugs of tea and biscotti. As the lanterns dimmed and the crowd thinned, I gathered blankets and chairs with Dad's help. The tide murmured below us, constant, steadfast. Walking home, I reflected on the evening's warmth, a warmth born from honest reflection and shared purpose. The challenges we'd faced had taught us that healing a community requires patience, empathy, and steady commitment, much like tending a garden over seasons. At home, I found Gregory asleep in his chair, a soft nightlight illuminating his peaceful face. I draped my blanket over his legs and tucked the poem I'd read into his hand. He stirred, opening his eyes briefly to smile. "Good night, grandfather," I whispered. As I climbed into bed, I thought of the tides, how they rise and fall, yet always return, shaping the land anew. In Moonrise Bay, I discovered that service, truth, and kindness ebb and flow in our lives, but together they carve a coastline stronger than any storm. With that comforting thought, I drifted into sleep, ready to greet tomorrow's tide. The mist hugged the shoreline as I pedalled toward Clearwater Bay High School, the salty air mingling with the faint scent of pine from the nearby forest. Today was the final judging for the Regional Youth Service Grant, an opportunity Dad and I had helped design in collaboration with Mayor Lopez. The grant would award up to $5,000 for student-led initiatives promoting sustainability, community care, or elder support. I'd submitted a proposal on behalf of our Eco Book Club and demonstration garden, with the aim of funding a mobile garden on wheels to reach remote neighbourhoods. I arrived early, parking my bike beneath the towering oaks in the staff lot. A banner fluttered above the entrance, Clearwater Bay Leadership Summit, Youth Innovation Showcase. Inside the gymnasium, long tables displayed project boards and prototypes, solar-powered water purifiers, recycled plastic benches, a 3D printed pen that distributed seeds as you wrote. The hum of excitement buzzed beneath fluorescent lights. I carried our mobile garden model, a wooden cart mounted on bicycle wheels, brimming with succulents, herbs, and successional wildflowers. I manoeuvred through clusters of students, many wearing matching t-shirts with their project logos. A group from Riverbend Academy presented a composting kiosk. Another from Lakeshore Tech demoed a phone app for Neighbourhood Watch. I spotted Raphael and Emma manning the tutoring club's poster, supporting literacy for ESL students. Their proud smiles lifted my spirits. At our table, I arranged the model mid-gym floor and pinned up our project board. Garden on wheels, cultivating community, one block at a time. The board outlined our goals, pilot routes, sustainability metrics, and testimonials from book club, members, tutoring families, and garden workshop participants. Next to the board, I placed sample seed packets and a miniature brochure I designed with step-by-step setup instructions. Soon, judges arrived. Mayor Lopez, Councilwoman Ramirez, Principal Hartwell, and an invited representative from the State Environmental Agency. They carried clipboards and wore attentive expressions. I straightened my posture and took a deep breath. Mayor Lopez stepped forward first. "Isabel Trent, tell us about your garden on wheels." I cleared my throat. Thank you. Our mobile garden adapts the demonstration garden concept for neighbourhoods without green space. It's built on a bicycle cart that can be pedalled or towed throughout Moonrise Bay, delivering fresh herbs, vegetables, and native flowers to residents. Each stop includes a mini workshop on planting, composting, or pollinator conservation. We've piloted 3 stops, 2 in senior housing complexes and 1 near the community centre, serving over 50 participants so far. Councilwoman Ramirez nodded. How do you measure impact? I tapped my board's metrics section. We track participant feedback, the number of plants distributed, and follow-up volunteer sign-ups. Our preliminary data shows a 95% satisfaction rate and a 20% increase in at-home plant stewardship among attendees. The environmental agency rep, Ms. Serrano, peered at the seed packets. I appreciate the hands-on approach. How will you expand beyond Moonrise Bay? I smiled. We intend to train student ambassadors from neighbouring communities, such as Harbourview and Willow Glen, providing them with kits and virtual workshops. This ensures the model scales without requiring continuous pedal power from our core team. Principal Hartwell tapped his pen. Funding aside, what challenges have you faced? I considered for a moment. Logistics, coordinating routes, securing safe parking, weatherproofing supplies, plus balancing schoolwork. But with support from Dad, our HOA contacts, and the Garden Club, we've built a reliable network. Our biggest ongoing challenge is reaching residents who distrust outside initiatives. That's why we always partner with local leaders, like Miss Chen from Riverbend Senior Centre, to earn trust first. As I spoke, I noticed Mrs. Pennington in the audience, seated near the back with a thoughtful expression. I held her gaze briefly and offered a small nod of acknowledgement. She nodded back, lips pressed in a thin line. The judges exchanged notes and moved on to the next projects. I stepped aside, letting Raphael join me, his guitar case slung over one shoulder. How are you feeling? He whispered. I exhaled. Prepared. He grinned. You're going to crush it. After 2 more rounds of presentations, the judges gathered at Centre Court. The gym fell silent. Mayor Lopez cleared his throat. In 3rd place, we recognise Riverbend Academy's composting kiosk. In 2nd place, the Lakeshore Tech Neighbourhood Watch app, and the 1st place grant of $5,000 goes to Isabel, Trent, and the Garden on Wheels project. Applause erupted as I stepped forward to accept a certificate. My heart thundered as I shook hands with Mayor Lopez and received an oversized check. Thank you, I said, voice steady despite the whirlwind in my chest. This grant will allow us to purchase weatherproof planter liners, tools for satellite ambassadors, and a motor assist kit for longer routes. Most importantly, we'll expand our reach to every corner of Moonrise Bay and hopefully inspire neighbouring towns to cultivate kindness in their own communities. The judges smiled, and I slipped the check into my tote bag, careful not to wrinkle it. Outside the gym, a crowd gathered around our table, congratulating us. Emma hugged me. You did it! Raphael struck an imaginary guitar chord. Encore! I laughed, waving them off. Then I spotted Mrs. Pennington approaching, her crisp navy jacket replaced by a cosy sweater. Isabel, she said, voice soft. Congratulations. I didn't realise how much good a little garden could do. I offered my hand. Thank you, Mrs. Pennington. It's never too late to sow seeds. She accepted my handshake, eyes misty. I'd like to volunteer, if you'll have me. I nodded. We'd be honoured. As the afternoon sun filtered through the gym windows, bathing our garden on wheels in golden light, I realised how far we'd come, from mowing her lawn under a heavy cloud of resentment to peddling purpose and unity across town. With renewed faith, I knew the true harvest lay not just in plants, but in the connections we cultivated along the way. The dawn light filtered through the pines as I locked my bicycle to the rack behind Clearwater Bay Library. Today was the culmination of months of planning, the inaugural Seed Exchange Fair, co-hosted by the Garden Club and the Eco Book Club. Our theme, Seeds of Change, aimed to encourage residents to swap native plant seeds, share gardening tips, and foster cross-generational collaboration. I carried a clipboard with the schedule, a stack of handmade seed packets, and a wooden sign painted with bright green lettering. Welcome to Seeds of Change. Inside the library's community room, folding tables formed a long horseshoe shape. Each station bore a label: native wildflowers, pollinator plants, herbal remedies, vegetable starters, and children's corner. Mrs. Alvarez and Mr. Chang bustled around, arranging jars of seeds and sorting informational pamphlets. The Henderson twins were setting up craft supplies for the children's corner, where youngsters could decorate biodegradable pots. A row of chairs faced the front podium, where Mayor Lopez and Councilwoman Ramirez would speak before the fair officially opened. I took a deep breath, smoothing my skirt. My heart raced with anticipation, but I felt ready, fortified by every workshop, tutoring session, and public speech I'd led. Dad slipped beside me, offering a reassuring smile. "You've done all the groundwork," he whispered. "Now enjoy the moment." I nodded and tapped my clipboard. "Let's start." At precisely 10 o'clock, Mayor Lopez stepped to the podium beneath a banner of pressed flowers. "Welcome, Moonrise Bay residents, to our first annual Seeds of Change Fair," he announced. "In partnering with Isabel Trent and our local garden and book clubs, we celebrate both community unity and environmental stewardship. Let this day be an opportunity to learn, share, and grow together." Polite applause rippled through the attendees: families, seniors, teens, and curious newcomers. Then Councilwoman Ramirez added, "Remember, every seed you plant has the power to transform not just your garden, but our entire town." With that, the fair opened. I guided Dad to my seed exchange station, labelled native wildflowers. Neatly lined jars held seeds of milkweed, lupine, and goldenrod, each critical for local pollinators. Residents approached with envelopes of their own seeds: sunflowers from backyard plots, echinacea from community gardens, and even heirloom tomato seeds from a 90-year-old neighbour. I encouraged them to fill our refillable packets and note the variety and date on each label. A gentleman named Mr. Patel arrived with a handful of milkweed seeds. "Thank you, Isabel," he said. "My granddaughter and I will plant these along the nature trail." I smiled as I handed him a packet. "That's wonderful. Milkweed is essential for monarch butterflies." Nearby, the children's corner buzzed with laughter. The Henderson twins overseen a line of excited children painting small terracotta pots and filling them with soil and marigold seeds. A shy first grader whispered, "I'm giving this to my teacher." I crouched beside her. "That's a meaningful gift. Marigolds brighten any room." A group of Eco Book Club members circulated among stations, jotting down tips in their notebooks and reminding visitors of upcoming workshops on composting and water conservation. And Emma volunteered at the herbal remedies table, explaining how to dry lavender and chamomile for soothing teas. Each interaction felt like a thread woven into a larger tapestry of shared knowledge. At midday, I led a brief mini-workshop in the library courtyard on creating a pollinator pathway. With a dozen participants gathered around, I demonstrated how to plant nectar-rich flowers in staggered rows to guide bees and butterflies from one garden to the next. I passed around laminated photos of our demonstration garden, pointing out successful layouts and soil preparation techniques. As questions flew about spacing, rainfall, and soil pH, I guided answers with references to our pilot data. When a young couple asked whether native grasses would work in a small yard, I encouraged them to try blue wild indigo, a compact perennial that thrived in sandy soil. After the workshop, the crowd lingered to sample lemonade and ginger mint cookies supplied by the PTA. Dad and I shared a proud glance as neighbours mingled, exchanging tips, clinking seed packets like small trophies, and forging new friendships. As the fair wound down around 3 o'clock, I announced a final community seed bomb-making activity. Residents formed circles on the lawn, combining clay, compost, and mixed wildflower seeds into small balls. Under my guidance, they shaped and tossed them into bare spots around the library grounds, each seed bomb a promise of future blooms. Even Mrs. Pennington joined the circle, her hands dusted with clay as she pressed seeds into the mixture. She caught my eye and offered a genuine smile. When the last seed bomb flew, Director Hernandez of the library stepped forward. On behalf of Clearwater Bay Library, thank you, Isabel, for your vision and leadership. We look forward to watching these seeds sprout and this community grow. As I packed away our materials, Dad placed an arm around my shoulders. You've done something remarkable, he said softly. You've planted more than seeds today. I traced the empty jars and folded tables, feeling a profound sense of completion. We planted hope. That evening, I biked home with the wooden Seeds of Change sign strapped to my back. The sky blazed with sunset, fiery hues reflecting the day's warmth. On the porch, Gregory sat with Dad, watching the light fade. I leaned my bike against the railing and joined them. Gregory's eyes sparkled as he asked, "How were your seeds today?" I grinned. "They flew farther than I ever imagined," he chuckled. "Just like you." As darkness settled and the first stars began to appear, I realized that our story of silent service turned vibrant community action was reaching its full bloom. With every seed shared and every life touched, Moonrise Bay had become more resilient, more connected, and more alive. And I knew that long after the fair ended and the garden cart rested for the season, the seeds of change would continue to grow, rooted in kindness, watered by truth, and blossoming in unity. The dawn I woke to on the day after the Seed Exchange Fair felt charged with possibility. Sunlight filtered through my curtains in golden slats, illuminating the little copy of The Littlest Lighthouse Keeper and the postcards of succulents tacked above my desk. 4 years had passed since my first ride to Mow Misses. Pennington's neglected lawn and every pedal stroke since had led me here, to a community brimming with gardens, stories, and shared purpose. After breakfast, Dad and I loaded the Garden on Wheels cart with supplies for its final season run: trowels, seed packets, laminated planting guides, and extra water barrels. Across town, Gregory's care home held its weekly morning programme, and we made our customary stop to deliver fresh herbs for the residents' window boxes. As I knelt beside Gregory's chair, tucking mint and basil into the planters, he squeezed my hand. "You've built more than gardens," he said softly. "You've built bridges." I smiled, brushing a stray hair from his forehead. We did it together. We pedalled on to Harbourview Senior Centre, where a cluster of neighbours, some once sceptical, waited with raised eyebrows and friendly greetings. They helped unload the cart, arranging pots of lavender and rosemary on portable stands. I led a brief demonstration: how to prune, how to repurpose old teacups as planters, and how to encourage bees with bright blossoms. Their laughter filled the air as they exchanged gardening anecdotes and shared photos of their own backyards. By midday, we wound through Willow Glen's narrow streets, where our student ambassadors had posted flyers and invited passers-by to join us. A trio of teenagers waited at the corner with notepads, jotting down feedback as I explained drip irrigation techniques using repurposed soda bottles. One ambassador, a quiet boy named Omar, handed me a small envelope. I wrote a letter," he said, cheeks flushed. "Thank you." Inside the envelope was a watercolour sketch of our first Garden on Wheels outing. Me and Dad smiling beside the cart under a pastel sky. I blinked back tears. "This is beautiful. Thank you, Omar." He nodded shyly and joined his friends as we rolled on, the bicycle wheels humming on asphalt. In the afternoon calm, I reflected on how our project had grown, from 3 pilot stops serving 50 neighbours, to a seasonal tour reaching hundreds, to inspiring neighbouring towns to launch their own mobile gardens. What had begun as a quiet gesture of neighbourly care had become a movement fuelled by evidence, empathy, and unwavering resolve. As dusk approached, we returned home along the boardwalk. The sky glowed in ember tones, and the Pacific breeze carried gull calls and the whisper of waves. Dad and I unloaded the last of the equipment and stowed the cart for winter. We paused on our front porch, breathing in the salty air. "I'm proud of you," Dad said, clasping my shoulder. "You've nurtured more than plants. You've nurtured a community's heart." I leaned into him. "I couldn't have done it without your guidance." That evening, I gathered my journal and a pen beneath the porch light and began to write. Journal, November 15th. Today, we completed the last garden on wheels route. I watched neighbours plant seeds in their windowsills and sidewalks, heard their laughter as we shared tips, felt the warmth of their gratitude. 4 years ago, I never imagined a single lawnmower would lead to this. I have learned that small acts, repeated with intention, can catalyse extraordinary change, and I have come to believe that service, guided by truth and compassion, is the anchor that holds a community fast in any storm. Finishing the entry, I looked up at the stars emerging above the cypress trees. I pictured our evening of reflection series, the workshops, the fair, the book club gatherings, and the laughter we'd shared under lantern light. Each event had been a chapter in our collective story, each neighbour an author in their own right. In the quiet of the night, I wrote one final note. Legacy, may the seeds of change continue to sprout in every heart. May kindness, backed by conviction, become our town's enduring light. And may each of us carry forward the lessons of Moonrise Bay, service, truth, and unity. Wherever our journeys lead, I closed the journal and set it beside my lamp. As I climbed into bed, I felt a deep contentment, knowing that the work we'd done would echo beyond seasons, gardens, and generations. Tomorrow, I would wake to new seeds, literal and metaphorical, to plant, nurture, and watch grow. But tonight, I rested in the quiet triumph of a community transformed, a promise kept, and a future bright with possibility.